What's up, everybody? It's pt.2 and welcome to another episode of Basic Mastering using stock Ableton Effects. So today's video, we're going to be talking about building a mastering template. What that means is what we're going to create first is a template that's saved as a preset that we can drop into any project or song, and then we tweak it for that specific song. That way, we don't have to build every component from scratch, which takes a lot of time. All we have to do is bring in our template at the end of the chain and then adjust the settings to fit the song that we're mastering. You see, in mastering, there is no preset that you can save because every song is different. The frequencies and dynamics of different instruments and different vocals can all be different for different songs, so having a preset as a template is a good starting point. But before we get to that, a word from our sponsor. Because this series about mastering takes a lot of work and a lot of information to put together, it wouldn't have been possible without the help of DistroKid. If you don't already know, DistroKid is the easiest and most cost-effective way for musicians, songwriters, producers to get their own original music online to all the popular streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, and all the others, all while letting you keep 100% of your revenue from your music. Subscriptions start as low as $19.99 per year, and it allows you to upload an unlimited amount of songs and albums. For an additional $12 per song, you can even release covers of your favorite songs. Get an additional 7% off your first yearly subscription by using this special promo link, distrokid.com/VIP/priyonjoni. For more information, or if you're ready to sign up, just follow that link. Now back to mastering. So let's explain real quick what each of the components are. The very first thing in the mastering chain would be an 8-band EQ. This EQ in the beginning is not so much for coloring your sound or bringing up the bass or boosting the trebles, scooping the mids. That's not what it's used for. What the EQ in the beginning is for rolling off the extreme low and high end spectrum of the frequency, and also subtractive EQ, which is to cut the nasty frequencies that are spiking. The reason why we want to do that is when we start building dynamics, which is afterwards when we start using multi-band compressors and compressors, we're going to be making the track overall louder. Now, if we have nasty frequencies that are spiking in there, it's going to be a lot more obvious when we boost the signal strength. So the first EQ is specifically for subtractive purposes, and many times I use all 8 bands to do the surgery. The next component is a multi-band compressor. In Ozone, I use a 4-band multi-band compressor. In Ableton, I use a 3-band compressor. And the reason why is because we create the 3-band compressor from doing 3 parallel 3-band EQs. The advantage of a multi-band compressor is the fact that we can control the volume in specific frequency bands. That way we can result in a more even distribution of frequencies. A really extreme example of what happens if you don't use a multi-band compressor is that, let's say there's a kick with a really, really loud thump in it. When it hits the limiter, it actually lowers the overall volume of the sound. Now, when you have a multi-band compressor and that same thump hits, the only thing that's affected are the lower band frequencies. Everything else remains the same. And that's what I mean by more even distribution of the volume throughout all the frequencies. So after the 3-band multi-band compressor, we have a 3-band multi-band saturator. Basically, the saturator introduces harmonic distortions, but it does it in the specific bands. By adding just a light touch of harmonic distortion and kind of mixing it wet-dry with the clean signal, it helps add a little bit more bite to your instruments, to your frequencies. Now, technically, it's not much different from a guitar's distortion pedal, but that would be a very, very extreme case. In this case, we're just adding just a little bit of a bite to specific frequency bands. So after the saturator, we have a 3-band multi-band imager. What the imager does is it can take the stereo width of the signal and it can make it wider, or it can make it more mono, like single-centered audio. At this step, there's one critical thing that we're going to do, and that is to mono the bass. You want your lower frequencies to be mono. The reason is because you do not want phase cancellation going on when your tracks are played live, especially in a big stereo system. In fact, back in the day, I believe that vinyl was specifically mastered so that the bass was mono, because if the bass is stereo, it could create distortions that are even strong enough to knock the needle out of its groove. So mono bass is always what you want to do. Now, the mids and the highs, you basically stretch them or not to taste. So if you want it to sound wider, bigger, this is where you can do it from the mastering chain. Now next, normally in Ozone, I would do the final limiter after this step. And that's because I don't even use an Ozone limiter. What I use is a really transparent limiter plugin, which can be pretty forgiving from anywhere between a -5 dB to a -15 dB reduction on your signal. Now the stock limiter in Ableton is not that transparent, it's very basic. So to help that, before we get to the final limiter, I added a glue compressor. The glue compressor in Ableton is a lot more transparent than the regular compressor. It's based on a Waves plugin that's based on an SSL compressor strip. What this is here for is it's there to add a little bit of compression that's transparent before we feed it to the limiter. And at the very, very end, we have the final limiter from Ableton Live. So once we have all these components, we're going to save it as an audio rack. That way, once we're done with the project that we're working on, we can just pull the audio rack and fit it to the mastering chain of the project. I'm going to give you guys a download link of the audio rack so you have it firsthand, but I really recommend watching how to build this rack. That way it'll give you a better understanding how it's structured and also how you want to change it. Maybe there's some other mastering advice that you want to apply that I didn't cover. And also, if you actually follow along building it, it'll help you a lot more understand how it works. So first, we're going to go into Audio Effects, and we're going to pull out an EQ8. We're going to take the EQ8, and I'm going to enable all the bands. We're not going to do a roll-off for number 8. We're going to do a notch filter. At the very, very bottom, we are going to do a roll-off. And we're going to do the ×4 low cut or high pass. And we're just going to set this around, roll off around 20. It's very normal for mastering engineers to roll off the bottom end because any information that happens below 20 hertz just becomes inaudible noise, and it could trigger the compressors to do things that you don't really want it to do. Also, it cleans up the bottom end from any low rumble noise. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to create an audio effects rack. We're going to expand it and enable the macro. And what we're going to do now is we're going to pull an EQ3 and drop it where it says drop audio effects here. We're going to take the frequency low and we're going to map it to macro 1. And we're going to take the frequency high and map it to macro 2. In this section of the audio effect rack, we can actually do parallel effects. And what's awesome about doing parallel effects is we can take the EQ, we can mute all the other frequencies, and add more effects after that that only affect that specific frequency. So first, let's add the effects that we're going to do all multiband. Starting with the compressor, and then followed by the saturator. Drag it here. And make sure you're within this audio effects rack. And then at the very end, we pull a utility, because this is going to be our stereo imager. So one of the other things I like to assign to the macro is I like the on-off of each effect to be on the macro. So whenever I want to just shut off the compressor and hear what it sounds like without it, I can do that. So right now, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to assign to macro 5. This is going to be called the compressor comp. Saturator, I'm going to assign this, right click to macro 6. And let's call this one Exciter. And for the very last one, for utility, we're going to put that on macro 7 and name this one Imager. So right now we have a single linear audio effects rack with the compressor, saturator, and utility. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to create 3 parallel identical effects, but each chain, each group, is going to be divided by a different frequency band. So we're going to have a compressor, saturator, and imager for the low end, and then for the mids, and then for the highs. So the way we do that is really easy. Now that we have all our effects and all our macros set, all we have to do is hold down Alt, and then click on chain, and then drag it down. Now you have 2 chains. 2 chain. Next, we do it one more time because we want a 3rd band. So starting from the top one, let's rename this, Command R. We're going to call this low. And while low is highlighted, we are going to mute mids and highs. So now the compressor, saturator, and utility for this is only going to affect the low end. For the next one, we rename it mids. And then we're going to mute everything but the mids. So when you switch from low, low is the only one highlighted. When you switch to mid, mid is the only one highlighted. And the very last one, Command R, going to be the highs. And we mute low and mid. So we also want to leave some of these settings in a good starting point. For this first macro, low to mid cutoff point, I had this at 140 hertz. And then the mid to high cutoff point I had at 2 kilohertz. So right there. So for the first compressor, I had the ratio set to 2, and then the attack to 265. Really soft attack. Oops. And then I had the release at about 100. Sometimes it's so much easier to just type in the values. Okay. The saturator, I left it where it's at, but for the utility, since this is the low, we talked about bass has to be mono, so we could lower the width all the way down or just click the mono button. We're going to basically leave that one alone in whatever track we use. So over here in mids, we're going to set the ratio to 1.6 to 1, attack at 20 milliseconds, and release at 100. And then everything else, leave it, and everything else, just leave it how it is. For the highs, let's set it to 1.6 to 1. And the attack, set it to 253. And the release at 268. Okay, so now you have your multi-band of effects, which is your compressor, saturator, and imager. So after this audio effects rack, outside of it, we're going to pull in a glue compressor. And then we're going to set these settings. Attack is going to go to 10. Release is going to go to 2. We're going to set the ratio all the way up to 10. And for dry wet, we're going to bring this down to 80%. And now at the very, very end, we're going to add the limiter. We're going to just set it to 6 milliseconds for the look ahead. And that's basically it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create an audio effect rack that encapsulates this whole thing. So from limiter, we're going to hold shift and then select it all the way back to the EQ. And then we're going to hit Command G. Now it's inside its own audio effect rack, including the little audio effect rack we had all our multiband inside. Now to save it, you just hit the little floppy disk icon, and it opens this up inside the browser. So you can just save this as Prion Joni Mastering, or whatever name you choose. Template 1. So say I'm going to close this out. So say you have a project open. All you have to do is go into your browser, search your mastering preset, and you just drag and drop, and it just opens right there below you. This way you don't have to go back from the beginning and rebuild your entire mastering chain. So you heard me say that you basically pull this mastering audio effects track and bring it down to the master section of your project. Typically, when you send a track to be mastered, the mastering engineer asks for your mix down rendered into one stereo file. But whenever you're mastering your own track, you have the option of either doing it from a bounce file, or you could bring it at the end of your project. The advantage of doing it within your project is this. There are times in mastering where you'll be tweaking something and you realize, oh wow, you know what's really making it sound bad? I don't like the way that snare sounds, and maybe changing that snare will totally fix whatever problem I have instead of trying to tweak the settings to make it work. When you're working within your project, you can easily go back into your tracks and change something if an element is causing whatever problem you're having. If a kick is too loud, or a kick is too quiet, or it's not the right kick, it doesn't sound good when it's compressed. This is the advantage you have when you're not mastering from a single stereo file. You're doing it from your entire project. That would actually be a combination of mixing and mastering. Maybe there's a nasty frequency in the vocals and you want to do surgical EQ just to tame down whatever is spiking. When you do it on the track level, you're not affecting all your other tracks by this one little surgical element that you are tweaking. So here's something that I would normally do, and we don't have a project open right now, but let's just pretend these 4 empty tracks are your entire project for the sake of this example. What I actually would recommend doing is, let's say these are all your tracks. I would actually select them and group them together, Command G. And what I would do is, instead of taking your mastering template and putting it down in the master, I would put it on top of where the entire group is. It'll give you the same effect because the mastering chain appears at the end of all your track elements. Now, why would I want to do this instead? Well, I'll show you. One of the advantages of using this technique is the fact that you can actually bring in another audio track and use a professionally released song to reference it. And when this track is outside of the mastering group, it's not affected by your mastering chain, unlike if it was to be dropped inside where the master is. This way, you can A and B a professionally released track as a reference that you can listen to back and forth and see how close your mastering is compared to the professionally released track. There's more advantages to this, but I'll show you what I mean in the next video. So yeah, this is it for building your mastering template in my series, Basic Mastering using stock Ableton Effects. So like I said before, you just go ahead and download the pre-made effects rack that I already made for you guys. Try to follow the steps and build your own mastering audio rack. It'll really help prepare you guys to understand how it's going to work in the next video, where we're going to take a track and we are going to master it. And after we're done mastering it, we're going to release it using DistroKid. All right, guys. Well, if you have any questions, comments, or anything to add about building your own mastering chain, please leave it in the comment section below. We'd love to hear your thoughts, answer any questions, or learn anything new or anything I didn't mention during this video. All right, if you like this video, please smash that like button. And if it's your first time here and you found this video useful, please click that subscribe button and don't forget to click that little bell icon so you get a notification the next time I upload a video. All right, guys, it was fun. Thank you for watching.